Hello and good evening. JC here from We Are the Arsenal. Welcome to another Arsenal news show. I hope everyone is doing fantastically well this evening, and I did promise that I wouldn't bring you another show until at least Friday. However, there's just been too much news not to bring you another show. I think I've got about 8, 9, maybe even 10 pieces of information that I'm planning to share with you this evening. If you do go on to enjoy today's show, please do drop a like on today's stream. And if you're new around here, watching live or back as a video, why not subscribe if you haven't done so already? So, without no further ado, I think we'll jump straight into things. Let's not waste any more time. So, first story that I'll be sharing with you today surrounds Pablo Mari, a story that broke late yesterday and has developed throughout today, a story that has been reported by both Romano and Di Marzio. Apparently, Udinese are keen to take him on loan for 6 months up until the end of the season. There is no obligation or option to buy with this particular deal. A lot of rumours did suggest that he might be off to his former club, Flamengo's, but the VP over there denies these reports and suggests that he is keen to stay in Europe. Italy seems to be the most likely destination for him. And Udinese, as I said, they look to be leading the race, but there are a couple of other clubs interested as well. Now, our next story is around a signing that Arsenal have made, one that you probably haven't heard of or even heard about just yet. This young lad, I think it's pronounced Lino Souza, a young 16-year-old lad from West Bromwich Albion. The news broke from Chris Wheatley, another left-back at Arsenal amongst the other two that we already have. He is English and part Brazilian, and we do have quite a big Brazilian contingent now growing within the club. He is highly thought of, and at the age of just 16, he was already playing at under 23 level for West Bromwich Albion and under 18s for England as well. So certainly one to keep an eye on. Hopefully not the only signing that Arsenal make during this January transfer window. A bit of a left field story that broke last night and continued to develop this morning. Didn't really hear too much about it after that into the afternoon or the evening, but Kostic was one that sprung up. A player of 29 years old, predominantly plays on the left wing for Frankfurt, and the story suggests that this would be a replacement for Pepe should he leave in January. Now, I don't think there's too much to read into this one, unfortunately. Well, I say unfortunately, probably a good thing. I can see Pepe staying at the club and getting games here, there and where he can between now and the end of the season. It may even suit Arsenal. If he puts in the odd good performance, it will drive his price up. Although Arsenal may be looking for a replacement winger in the future, 29-year-old Kostic, who plays predominantly on their left-hand side, doesn't seem to fit the mould of what Arteta and Edu are looking to build at Arsenal. As mentioned to you in my previous show, Flo Balogun was on the verge of completing a loan deal with Middlesbrough, and today it was made official. So the very best of luck to him. Hopefully, as I said, he can get the minutes in the tank, come back, maybe, just maybe, push some of the strikers at the club for a starting berth. If not, go back out and maybe get a few more minutes on a second loan. Bruno Tavares was linked with a move away from the club today, surprisingly by Gazzetta. Apparently, Lazio interested in taking the player on a 6-month loan with an option to buy the player. I wouldn't read too much into this particular rumour. I think this is the media looking to write stories off the back of his, shall we say, emotional exit against Nottingham Forest last week. He is still going to be a valued member of this squad. He will continue to drive competition with Kieran Tierney, and you never know. If he's injured, it's a very, very good backup player to have at the club. Can't really see there being too much truth in this one, but if the player continues to be unhappy, will Arteta want to keep an unhappy player at the club and in the camp and upset the dressing room, which is in a pretty good place as things stand. Now, Vlahovic, would it be an Arsenal news video, stream, show, whatever you want to call it, unless this man was mentioned or even involved? There are so many different stories around this player at the moment. It's difficult to believe which ones are true, which ones are false. But this evening, a gentleman called Miguel Delaney from The Independent mentioned that one of the reasons why the deal hasn't gone through yet, one of many reasons why the deal hasn't gone through yet, is that Fiorentina are looking for a straight 75 million cash deal, whereas Arsenal are looking to, structure a deal similar to the one that was done for Pepe over a 4-year period. And just like all the other reports, apparently the player isn't said to not want to join Arsenal. It's just a case of, in this story, the club not being interested, which is the complete opposite to some of the other stories that have been published over the last few days. Another player that I wanted to talk about who seems to be coming up in conversation, very much like Vlahovic on a daily basis, is Bruno Guimaraes, a player of Lyon. Now, the reason I wanted to speak about him today is because apparently, according to the French Football Network, there are two options on the table for any clubs who are interested in the player. Option number one is that you offer a straight cash deal of 45 million euros with bonuses on top. And the second option, which would be a really good option to potentially take up for Arsenal Football Club, which is a 6-month loan deal with an obligation to buy at the end of it. Juventus also said to be interested in the player. Whether or not this particular rumour is true, I think if it was, there'd be literally clubs lining up to try and take advantage of that 6-month loan deal with an obligation to buy. I do think that he's too much of an integral part of the club in terms of their first team plans for the remainder of this season for them to allow him to go out on loan, whereas a cash deal of around 45 million euros plus bonuses seems to be the more likely outcome. But Fabrizio Romano has said a deal for this player will be complicated if it is completed, whether it's Arsenal or another club. Moving on to some team news, because Arteta did hold his press conference today. 3 names on screen who missed out against Nottingham Forest for various different reasons. Tomiyasu had calf issues, Emil Smith-Rowe groin problem, and Xhaka COVID. Xhaka is out of isolation. Arteta mentioned today that it would mainly be a case of whether or not he was fit enough physically to feature, because all players experience different effects after recovering. Didn't really give too much away on ESR or Tomiyasu, but he did mention that all 3 players would be assessed ahead of the game against Liverpool tomorrow. And please, 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 I hope they're all fit. It hurts me to say it, but we did miss Xhaka. He's not my favourite player at Arsenal, but in midfield against Forest, we did miss him, and we do need him back, especially with Partey not being available. ESR deserves minutes with the season he's having at Arsenal Football Club this season. And likewise with Tomiyasu, we can't afford not to have him playing at right back. We don't have the quality and depth there to not utilise him against what will be a tough opposition, even without Salah and Mane, who are away at AFCON. So our next 2 stories are going to be the headline stories. One that came a little bit out of nowhere today up next. But if you are enjoying today's show, please do drop a like on the video. It really, really helps me out. And if you're new around here, why not subscribe, whether you're watching live or back as a video. And before we jump into our headline stories, if you have any questions whatsoever that you want to ask me with regards to some of these stories, or general questions with regards to Arsenal Football Club, get them in the chat now, and I'll read through some of them after we finish these next 2 stories. So, as I said, the next one was a bit of a surprise, but in a good way. Youri Tielemans. Arteta said to be a huge fan of the player. Arsenal have been tracking him since his AS Monaco days. Now, the story that broke earlier, I believe it was from a gentleman called Ben Jacobs. He mentioned that Arteta is a big fan of the player. He also mentions that there is only 18 months left on his current contract. Now, in the summer, that value will have decreased slightly further than what it would have been now. Leicester could potentially be tempted into a big money deal in January. Now, unfortunately, I can't see it happening in January simply because we're pushing really hard at the moment, apparently, for a striker, whether it's Vlahovic or someone else. And that's going to cost somewhere in the region of, well, north of £50 million at the very, very minimum. As much as I would love Tielemans at Arsenal, he's certainly going to go and move on to a big club wherever he ends up next. However, another story off the back of what Ben Jacobs reported was Charles Watts. He said that talks have taken place at the London Colony in the last few weeks. That's not to suggest that a deal is being lined up for January, but it could be initial talks with a move being lined up for the summer period. No slips yet on what that value could be, whether it's 50 million, 60 million, 70 million even, but Leicester don't typically tend to let their better players go for free, but in the summer he will only have 12 months left on his contract, so certainly one to keep an eye on. And with Arsenal needing midfield players at the moment, I would certainly welcome it. So up next is our final story of today's show, and one that could probably come to fruition if all of today's rumours are to be believed. It started yesterday evening and it has really developed throughout the day. Fabrizio Romano mentioning that the likelihood is that Arsenal would look to get this player in on a 6-month loan deal, and it is at advanced negotiations. Now, Juventus at the moment have a number of injuries in midfield and slightly reluctant to let the player go without bringing in a replacement first. Hence what I mentioned about Bruno Guimaraes earlier on. So I hope that doesn't come into effect for this particular deal. He's on the bench this evening in the Italian Cup, and Allegri is said to be looking to make a decision on whether or not he wants to proceed with this deal after the Cup game this evening. Read into that what you will, but it's certainly one to keep an eye on. Arsenal lack depth in midfield at the moment and definitely need a player there. A 6-month loan deal as a bit of a stopgap between now and the summer could be ideal for the club before pursuing targets like Guimaraes, for example, or Yuri Tielemans. But over the next couple of days, Artur could be the player that Arsenal sign, the first major signing of the January transfer window. So let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. In today's show, I did try to bring you the sources of all of the information, and then it's down to you if you want to believe if they're true or whether or not some of these media outlets are fishing for information. So let's go over to the comments. Quite a few of you have tuned in today. Really do appreciate you coming in and showing your support. And if there are any questions, we'll get through them now. Neil from Cannon FC, thank you very much for coming in and showing your support. Keith from Mostly Arsenal as well. Really do appreciate it. Judge, so all the regular panellists, and they go on to have a bit of a conversation between themselves as well. Chippy Boy, thank you very much for coming along. Really do appreciate it. If Mauri leaves, doesn't that leave Short the cover at left centre-back? Yes, it does, actually. And this was something that Tom from the Gooner Talk was talking about when I watched one of his shows the other evening. He mentions that it would leave us a little short at centre-back. It would mean that we have Gabriel, Holding, Chambers and White. It's only 4. Rekic potentially could come back in after his appearance at the AFCON for Tunisia. It does give us 5 centre-backs. It's a bit of a surprise to me that there isn't an obligation or an option to buy in there. It makes more sense to do it on that basis, but we'll have to wait and see. Keith coming in with a comment here. Get Bruno in. Absolutely couldn't agree with you more. He's my number 1 target. Although in saying that, now that Yuri Tielemans has been thrown into the mix, I don't know. It's difficult. He's a different type of player, but we'll have to wait and see. Keeping the dressing room happy is just as important as tactics. Absolutely. You can tell me how dire our centre midfield situation is when we're relying on Xhaka to be fit. And yes, it is a dire situation, unfortunately. I'm assuming you're referring to the last slide, Chippy Boy. Artur, Brazilian central midfield player, formerly of Barcelona before moving to Juventus. He's 25 years old. Really good at Barcelona. Hasn't worked out for him at Juventus. But there's a couple of players that have ended up at Juventus and it's not worked out. Cancelo was one of them. He looked very bang average when playing in the Italian league before coming to the Premier League. He's now probably one of the best performers in the Premier League. And there's another name that some people might be familiar with. A Thierry Henry, I think, used to play for Juventus, and he wasn't that good over there. He did alright at Arsenal afterwards, after we managed to sign him up. Okie dokie. Any other comments coming in here? I'd rather we get a midfield player, and yeah, absolutely agree. I think from what I've read today, well, over the last few weeks, as a matter of fact, Arteta and Edu believe that we're lacking in the striker department. We're lacking goals in that particular area. And there's a big opportunity now for Arsenal to really go out and grab top 4 and Champions League football next season. And he sees it as the most important position to fill. It's a big question, because you've got a big position to fill in striker, but then you've also got a lack of depth in central midfield. Hopefully the club go out and sort both, a midfield player and a striker. That would be a 10 out of 10 window for me in terms of sorting out our problems. A couple more comments coming in before we finish up. Artur, poor form could be due. Yeah, it could be due to the players around him. It could be due to a lack of consistent games. It could be down to the system. It could be down to the league itself. There's a whole host of different reasons for why it might not be suiting him at the moment. But I remember his first couple of seasons at Barcelona. He was really good, well relied on as well. Not too sure why they let him go in the end, but as I said, headline story for today, Artur looks very close. Advanced negotiations to joining Arsenal. Decision will apparently be made after the cup game between Juventus and Inter Milan this evening. So it will definitely be one that develops throughout tomorrow. But that is going to about wrap things up for today's Arsenal news show. I did say yesterday that I wouldn't be back until Friday, but I do mean it this time. I will be back this Friday for a reaction and analysis video for the first leg of the Carabao Cup semi-final against Liverpool, as long as I don't try and pull another fast one. And I'll be joined by some of our usual panellists on the channel, from Keith, Neil, Judge or John, depending on availability. So if you have missed them, they will be back with me on Friday. Thank you very much to everyone that has joined me over in the comments section. And it's been an absolute pleasure spending some of my evening with you. But for now, I'm JC, and I'll catch you on Friday.